And he started the interview with me by saying, well, I don't think I'm very brave. But I'm honored to be here, and I think that is a identifying factor of someone who is brave when they say they don't feel very brave. Somebody who runs in to save somebody in a burning building, they come out and, you see them, getting interviewed on the news and they're like, I'm not a hero. I'm just here,
Namaste. You're listening to the Savannah Podcast. Join us on an exploration of Eastern spirituality, yoga philosophy, and conscious living for the new age. This podcast is a production of SavannahSpirit.com, where you can find a large selection of Om and yoga clothing, spiritual jewelry, and unique fair trade gifts from the Far East. Now here's your host, Ashton Szabo.
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Savannah Podcast. We've got a great show in store today. I'm happy to say that I get to have my friend on the show. Her name is Emily Ann Peterson. She's a musician, a teacher, singer-songwriter, author, and podcast host of Bare Naked Bravery. Excited to have her on the show today. Emily Ann, welcome.
Yay, let's get naked.
So today we're talking all about bravery. And I want to start because, there's something that has stuck with me my whole life that my sensei had said to me. And he said, look, everyone but fools feel fear. And something that I would add is to say that, well, the average person feels fear and they're just paralyzed. They just sit still. Nothing happens. But what he used to say is that the difference between a coward and a hero is that a coward steps back in the face of that fear and a hero steps forward. Now, you were a cellist for 17 years, and then you were diagnosed with a degenerative neurological hand tremor, which obviously devastated the professional side, at least, of cello playing. I imagine it affected you even just playing it for pleasure. What did that experience teach you? And in particular, what did it teach you about bravery?
There's three reactions to fear, or when we are faced with a fearful thing, a moment in our life: fight, flight, and freeze. And beyond that, I didn't really know that much about fear and about bravery when I was diagnosed with my essential tremor. And I was really curious about it. And I just started asking questions, reading books. I started asking different questions. It was the start of the book that I'm working on right now. It jolted me into my next phase. And I'm the kind of person that when something bad happens to me, I try to learn as much as I can about it so that I can beat it, basically. And I knew that I couldn't beat the tremor. So I couldn't educate myself enough to get over it or heal myself. But I could learn as much as I could about bravery. So I guess it's my form of fighting rather than flighting or freezing, was just, okay, well, I don't know anything about this, so I'm going to learn as much as I can. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, well, I mean, because one of the things that I recognize in my own personal life is that whenever I'm scared of something and that original impulse of oh my gosh, run away, that to me is the universe signaling me that hey, pay attention, because this is one of those important moments. While I can't necessarily relate to your specific situation of lifelong something and then it being taken away, I've stepped out of things. I mean, even my experience of moving from San Diego, where I was teaching on average 15 to 20 yoga classes a week, thriving as a yoga teacher, and then moving to Northern Cal, where I generally only teach one public class a week now. I had to completely shift and change the way in which that I use my skills to support my family, and that was horrifyingly scary to me. I mean, it was terrifying to recognize, wow, I'm going up there without any type of way of making money the way that I have for the past, or 5 years that I had been living in the States, and it was really scary. But it was that process of like, okay, this is one of those moments I have to trust in and move forward anyways.
I think one of the things that I've learned through having all of these conversations with my podcast and also writing my book and also just the daily practice of continuing to be an artist and a musician, there are what I see to be three basically bubbles of or three ingredients of bravery. The first being vulnerability, which includes being honest and taking risk, or having a sense of risk, like something's at stake. Improvisation, which is this like using your constraints and your actual limitations, your actual physical limitations, and also the external environmental limitations, like your location or the economy that you find yourself in, or the layoff that you just went through, whatever. And then the third part is intuition, which is that sense of knowing and reading into things, because there's parts of bravery that like we can learn and learn and learn and learn. We can educate ourselves. We can employ other people's help. We can ask for help as much as possible. And that's brave in and of itself as well. But at the end of the day, there is this skill of intuition that is mixed into all of the stuff I already mentioned. And that's what makes us brave, is when we can listen to that intuition and act on all of those other elements.
What if someone's intuition is telling them that they're, scared and want to run away? How does that tie into the aspect?
I would say that sometimes being scared and running away is actually the brave choice. Take, for instance, a dark alley. Like just because sometimes running away means you're actually smart and you are doing the right thing. Whereas running right into the face of danger does not always mean that you're being brilliant about where you're at and where you're going. So.
Well, and I hearing you talk, I think of like leaving an abusive relationship. That takes a lot of bravery. That's in one sense running away from something. It's leaving something, but it's the bravery to do it, even though the fear there is around, consequences and things like that. And that takes a lot of bravery for people to do. Do you think that bravery is somehow like a genetic thing? Like people are just born with more or less of it? Do you think it's something that we're born with, period? Like we're all born with a certain amount, and then like through childhood, it gets kind of chipped away at? How do you see bravery in terms of that?
Well, it's a skill, it's a muscle, and it atrophies. Or it's a metaphorical muscle, I should say, because it's not an actual muscle. I'm talking to you, yoga teacher extraordinaire. You would know.
Now engage your bravery muscle. It's right behind your glute.
Yeah, so it is a metaphorical muscle, and it can atrophy, which I think is an extreme example of that is agoraphobia, people who are really scared of leaving their house. Or social anxiety, for a less extreme version of that. And I'm not saying that social anxiety isn't real or that everyone can conquer it. These are like actual mental disorders that need professional assistance. But I do think that bravery is an element in healing those parts of ourselves, and it requires practice. Like you hear anybody who's trying to become a better public speaker, or the public speaking experts, they all say, you just gotta like get out there and try it. And some have differing opinions. They say, get out there and do the hardest thing first, and then just like shock yourself into getting over it. Whereas others kind of take the more gentle approach, saying like, well, do just the next thing that feels not the most scariest, just the next scariest. Like constantly trying to push that boundary of the comfort zone out. Mm-hmm. So there's different approaches to practicing bravery. And I think that's up to you and your personality type, and what what works best for your life. And that's part of using your constraints, right?
Now, regardless, kind of taking it aside from the big, well, go for the big thing or go for the little thing, what advice do you give people that you work with in terms of engaging this bravery? And to say, like, you're a musician, artists in general are masters, or we could say that they're continuously dancing in this realm. You mentioned vulnerability earlier. Vulnerability is one of these key aspects where artists are constantly having to be in that space where you're creating something and then you're putting it out to the world. It takes so much bravery to do that. Musicians, I mean, anyone working in the arts, how do you help people create plans or steps to actually actualize moving forward or gaining more bravery, working on that muscle?
Well, I think you and your listeners are probably really familiar with just showing up to the mat. Like you have to show up to the mat. That's the first step. You have to appear. You have to wake up, put your feet on the floor, and stand up. You don't have to make the bed every day, but you do have to get out of the bed. And I think that's every day, similar to yoga. Every day that you practice doesn't always mean it's going to get better. There's also, in regards to how I help people put themselves out there, I do actually encourage them to look into their personality types, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, Strengths Finder, Strengths Quest. Those are all really helpful tools to educate yourself about yourself, because the bravery starts inside of you first. And then the choice to be brave externally is up to you. And that's part of the bravery that everybody else gets to see. But you can still show up and be brave without other people knowing that.
So can you expand on that a little bit more, from talking about being brave on the inside but not brave on the outside? Because when I hear that, I mean, there's a part of me that says, like, pfft. I mean, if you're not being brave on the outside, then who cares? Like, I can be the bravest person in the world on the inside, but if I don't put it into action, to me, that doesn't really matter. And I don't think that's what you were saying, but I would just like to kind of clarify that a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, yes is the answer. And no, of course, because that's always the answer to everything, right? Yes and no. There's, the first ingredient of bravery is vulnerability that I've discovered. And in order to make vulnerability, you have to have some sort of boundary or some sort of hiddenness about yourself. Maybe you feel like you're revealing everything to everyone, and that's why it feels so brave. But the fact that it feels so brave is because at one time everything was hidden, right? And how you choose to hide yourself, or how you choose to reveal part of yourself but not all of yourself, that's the primary role of boundaries in how to be brave. Because I can be brave to you and your listeners here in this conversation and not tell you that, I've got a cold sore on my face right now. I didn't have to mention that, and you would have thought, oh, she sounds so with it and together. Nope, got a cold sore, smack on my face. So that's part of the, choosing to reveal that, or choosing to find finding your power of choice is really powerful and empowering when you're trying to be brave.
Well, what would you say, and kind of you're kind of mentioning as you're explaining this here, but what would you say to how important it is to really accept oneself in order to be brave? Like, can you be brave if you deny yourself, if you are trying to kind of hide yourself from the world? I mean, I understand that there's a process to it, but
wouldn't it be a brave thing to tell somebody that you don't actually accept yourself?
In that specific case, absolutely. I would say that, we could say, like, hey, I struggle with accepting myself. In the same way they're like, hey, I'm afraid of heights, whatever it is, of like acknowledging it is great, because you're saying, okay, well, I do have this, in that case, the lack of acceptance. But I think there's so much power in how we vocalize things and how we verbalize things. I was watching something the other day, and you got guys like Muhammad Ali and Conor McGregor. These are prize fighters, but they're like, hey, I'm making the claim that I'm the best in the world. And what that does, that makes them completely accountable to everyone around them to really be like, hey, I am this. So now that to me takes a lot of courage, because you're gonna have people saying, well, hey, you said you're the best and you're not the best right now. And I think on the other side of that, saying things like, well, I'm afraid of this, so I can't do that, then also paralyzes us. So I'm wondering where the line is between, acknowledgement of our fears and then kind of moving through our fears of saying, okay, well, yeah, I can acknowledge that I'm afraid, but that comes back to that original point of like, I'm going to step forward. I might be afraid of expressing who I am. Or I might be afraid of really embracing all of who I am. But am I still willing to step forward into that? And that usually means acknowledgement and action instead of just hiding it in.
That's the power of intuition and being sensitive to where your boundaries are and how much contextual limitations exist, or what society is trying to convince you to do or not do, or how frequently you've told everyone that you are the best in the world or that you don't accept yourself. I think of these ingredients of bravery as being like, someday I'm going to do this. I'm going to put it on a cork board and like show people. Having 3 nails on a cork board, and around one of the nails is the vulnerability nail, let's say, and there's 3 rubber bands: context, honesty, risk, and boundaries. And each of those rubber bands can have different strengths or sizes. Like say I'm a person who just has a high sense of personal privacy, right? So that would mean the limitation on that on my boundary rubber band would be a lot smaller than someone else's. Mm-hmm. Then you have the second nail that is imagination, and that's like imagining. You have your sense of possibility, your outside the box thinking, all those things, and each of those elements that make up imagination have their own strengths of a rubber band and links of rubber bands. So the same thing goes for intuition, like our sense of action and willingness to go for it, and sensitivity towards all of these other elements we mentioned. And so the goal, like bravery, is when all of those rubber bands are overlapped on each other. So if you put your finger in between those 3 nails and try to wrap around your finger all of those rubber bands from those nails, your finger would feel tightness in different locations. So you'd have like maybe you would find that there's like really short rubber bands on your intuition side, which would mean that bravery would occur kind of close to home on intuition, or close to home on bravery, or it would maybe not look like the same kind of bravery that Ashton or Emily Ann would have, because each of those elements are very different. And when they're mixed together, you get a different kind of bread,
When you're talking here about, the qualities of bravery, I'm curious about as well, other than fear, how do we sabotage our ability to be brave?
By not practicing it, I think, and a lack of awareness. I mean, like fear is something that we can't get over. Like I'm sure there are a lot of people rolling their eyes or yelling at their speaker right now. Fear is always going to exist.
Yeah, I don't think we ever get over fear. And that goes to that original point. Like only a fool's not going to feel fear. That's a basic human trait. Like there's nothing wrong with feeling fear. It's, as we've been talking about, is what we do with it.
Right. But I do think that, you can really shoot yourself in the foot by not practicing some of these elements, or by not trying to build your sense of possibility or build your own strength of boundaries. And there are ways that you can build each of these ingredients into your life. Like, you can just take a minute to acknowledge where your own internal limitations are, or you can take some art classes to help build your visual perception skills. You can take some yoga classes to help build your physical sense of surrounding and your physical intuition, or even self-defense classes to build that sense of power and choice in a situation where you don't feel like you have a lot of choice. Again, these are all big, seemingly not related connections to bravery, but they are ways that you can practice bravery if you are intending to do so.
Well, and I love the concept and idea of practicing bravery, creating situations to cultivate that experience. I'm also curious though, because you work a lot with music students, and again, this is a realm where I'm imagining where, hey, someone's playing a musical instrument and now they're being asked to go out in front of an audience of people. My daughter's about to be in the Nutcracker, and she's finally starting to realize, like, oh wait, hold on a second. I mean, like, she's a bit of a showman already, show person. So she tends to be very outgoing. Her middle name is Star, and she kind of lives up to it. She'll go out and like, hey, everybody, I'm here. But she's starting to get like, well, wait a second, like, everyone's going to be there and everyone's going to be watching me. Like, what happens if I fail? And yes, we could be practicing stuff on the side, but as a yoga teacher, I teach techniques to help people in the moment of those types of things. I'm curious, as a musician, are there things that you encourage with your students for in the moment? I'm not talking about like, well, just keep putting yourself out there, play in front of your family, play in front of your friends, but actually like, you're on stage right now and you feel like you're about to like have diarrhea, throw up, and faint at the same time. What do you encourage them to do in those moments?
I would say that acknowledging your limitation in that way, acknowledging that you are going to feel really awful about the task at hand. It's going to feel bad. Your brain will be distracted. And if all of that is hinging on whether you can play or not play this song, then maybe you should learn the song backwards and forwards so that in the moment you can feel like, okay, I'm going to feel really, really crummy. But at least my fingers will take over and I've got like muscle memory that's going to take over and do the job for me. So that rote memory, muscle memory is important, because when we are in a situation that is scary, the things that are default take over. Right. So that default fear of like a big gulp and, like that knot in your stomach and, feeling nauseous, those things are going to take over, because that's the lizard brain part of you that's like just really scared. But you also have this thinking part of you. And if that thinking part of you already knows what to do and play the song or go through the talking points or break up with somebody, if you've practiced it beforehand, then in the moment when you're totally distracted by how scary it is, you at least can have some confidence in the fact that you are confident in your decision, first of all. And secondly, you know what you're going to do. You know what you're going to say ahead of time. It's a tricky thing, though. I think, stage fright is something that all of us musicians, a lot of professional musicians, myself included, have social anxiety, stage fright of some sort, which there's a lot of studies on why that is. But the thing that helps me the most is to make it more personal and less overwhelming as possible. So in the green room,
what do you mean? What do you mean by more personal?
Well, I make a point to take down that fourth wall on the stage. So in acting, they talk about the fourth wall being the wall between yourself and the audience. And a lot of musicians just get up there, they play the songs, they don't really make a lot of connection with the audience. And that terrifies me, because then the only thing determining my quote unquote success of the evening is how well I play the songs. But my perfect execution of the songs, my knowing self knows that my perfect execution of the songs is not why I do this. Like, I do music, I play on stage because I know that it is one of the best ways that I'll ever be able to experience and ever be able to be part of connecting humans with each other. And so if I can go back to and make that my core of the whole performance, then the perfection elements of whether I did it great or not come a little bit lower in the priority scale of things. So, and you know, that's a really philosophical way to approach performance and approach stage fright. But in a practical sense, that looks like taking a moment backstage in the green room to remind myself of that and not get distracted by the hubbub of sound check and all of that. I have to choose to make a point to take like 5 minutes and go, okay, I'm here because there are at least 3 people who need to hear one of the songs that I'm going to play tonight, and remind myself what the songs are about and why I wrote the songs and the purpose behind what I'm doing. It also practically looks like talking to the audience right away when I get on stage, because it's just a practice. Again, it's like a ritual or a practice that reminds me that I'm not alone on the stage, that the stage is not just me against them, however big them is, you know.
I'm hearing something that's kind of coming through all this that I really enjoy and appreciate as well, and comes very close to kind of what we'd experienced through yoga, where, you know, you're in those moments on stage and you're feeling whatever it is that's coming up. And you mentioned the importance of acknowledging that, and I would say absolutely, of like recognizing, okay, this feeling is arising in me right now. And that's like absolutely critical in any process moving forward, because if you're not acknowledging it, then you're at the complete will of whatever that thing is.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in warrior pose and you feel something tweak in your back, that is not the cue to go into triangle.
Right. Well, but my thought with it is, and where I was going was that, you know, you talk a lot about connection and perfection. And I think, you know, a lot of people that are coming also aren't coming for perfection. They're coming for that connection. They want to feel connected to the music, and that music doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be authentic and real. And I think, you know, what I see in that situation of, okay, now that I can acknowledge that, and then I can acknowledge that my purpose here is not perfection, but connection, then what that actually does, in the way that I would use the words, is make it less personal. And so that we're not identifying as much with the specific things. Like, I am feeling anxiety, instead of recognizing like, well, anxiety is coming through my body right now, but that's not who I am. That's just this thing that's coming up. And as we recognize that the purpose truly is connection, well, then that can be our emphasis. And then it doesn't matter that I feel like I want to throw up, or it doesn't matter that, you know, I screwed up that chord, or maybe I'm not going to play this perfectly. It's like, how deeply can I connect to others? And I feel that no matter what you're doing, that's a huge part of just human experience, of learning how to let go of our over-identification with these things that are happening and just go right back to that connection.
I think that's something that, like, those of us that are creative entrepreneurs, yourself included, your livelihood depends on, you know, how well you connect with your audience. All businesses have customers, whether it's another business that is their customer or the actual customers that purchase their products. So even though you're going through a big, huge launch as a business owner, it's not about you. Even if, you know, you've just invested a ton of money in your education for your graduate degree, it's not about you. Like, you went to school so that you could probably do something other than just give yourself a piece of paper, you know, or you invested a ton of money in a website because you wanted to connect with people. And so it's all about connection, everything that we do, especially as creative entrepreneurs. And when we are scared of putting ourselves out there, the easiest and the quickest way of helping calm those nerves down is to remind yourself that, oh my gosh, it's not about me. Mm-hmm. Oh, and then by flipping it from self-centered to not selfless, because you are still involved in the experience, but you are now a steward of the experience that you're giving your customers and you're giving your audience members and you're giving your classmates or your students as a yoga teacher. So having a steward's mindset or a stewardship mindset in all of this bravery is really helpful. It takes the spotlight off of you without having to get completely off stage, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Given what's going on in the world right now, both, politically across the globe, environmentally, everything else that's going on, how important is it that people really practice and cultivate bravery right now?
So important. That's like the, if I grew up in Sunday school, that's like answering Jesus in all the Sunday school questions. Jesus. Yeah, it's super important. And I think because everyone's bravery looks and appears differently in the world, it's all that much more important that each of us are brave, because someone's going to need my bravery. Someone out there has a cold sore on their face too. They don't want to feel alone. Or someone else out there really is just dreading a work thing that's happening, like the holiday party that's coming up or a big conference that's coming up. And they want to know that they are going to be okay. In whatever way that you can help calm those nerves or be brave or show up to the situation. Like there seems to be a thin veil on some really intense, I'm trying to pick the right words because I'm from the Northwest. So politically correctness is important. Harassment, street harassment. I have a lot of friends who are in minority groups of various kinds. And even up here in Seattle, they've experienced some street harassment. One of my friends on Facebook, and also she's an artist for the Bare Naked Bravery coloring book, which is super cool. She's great. Her name's Kelly Jackson. She would be fine with me mentioning this. Her and her daughter were walking on the street the other day and were harassed by some guy. It's one of those situations where it was so public that no one helped. Because they thought everyone else thought somebody else would help, So finally, Kelly had to ask someone who was like taller than her and, and whiter than her to stand up to this guy that was harassing her. And she had to just say really loudly, "Hey, this guy is harassing me. Can you make him stop?" And so he made it, it's like, oh, okay. So it was brave of her to even ask for help, because I think a lot of times when harassment is received, we don't do anything about it, or we just get smaller, think, oh, if I get smaller, if I become invisible, maybe they won't see me, or maybe they'll stop. But sometimes that's a brave choice, but sometimes it's also brave to ask for somebody else to do their job that they should be doing anyways. And the whole situation was just a really weird situation, right? And unfortunate in a lot of cases. But we need to be brave. Like Kelly needed to be brave so that her daughter would know what to do should that happen to her when she would, later on in her life. Her daughter needed to be brave and a brave observer.
Well, and I love the idea too of not just being brave for yourself, but being brave for others, being brave for your community. And I think that's something that's really needed today, where, it's one thing to say, well, I stick up for myself. Like, great, awesome, you're brave for yourself, but how brave are you for others? Because as we were talking about earlier, this importance of connection. And it's like, if we are truly connected to other people, then our bravery is extended into our connections, not just ourselves. And we see a rise in hate crimes recently. There's all kinds of things going on across the globe. I think it's really important that we step up for one another to really support one another, and that includes both sides. It doesn't just mean, okay, well, now it's an us versus them, my community versus their community, but rather like, okay, I'm going to stand up for something here that I know that's right, but not in just the, like, let's just bash down the wall, but actually recognize in that moment too, there's a connection piece to be made. And all right, well, why is this person, in that case of the harassment, why is this person harassing them? I could go up and just punch him in the face because, no, look, I'm brave and I'm standing up for it. But that doesn't solve a damn thing. If we learn how to stand up and make a connection, now we can actually, as a community, as a nation, as a planet, really start to grow together instead of grow apart. And that's what I'm really afraid of right now is that we're growing apart so much. And I think it takes a lot of bravery. It takes some bravery to stand up for your community. Well, I'll say it takes some bravery to stand up for yourself. It takes even more bravery to stand up for your community, but it actually takes the most bravery to stand up for everybody. And that becomes challenging, especially when people's views aren't your own. And that doesn't mean enable views that you disagree with, but rather like being brave enough to encounter them on a honest playing field or a receptive playing field. We'll bring up a concept like racism, for example. It's like, I have no tolerance for racism. I'm not gonna like meet that at an equal ground to say, well, that's your opinion and this is my opinion. We're both okay to have our opinions. I don't believe in that, but I do believe in the necessity of, I have to hear this person and why they've come to these conclusions and feelings. Because if I just go, well, you're just racist, and then I just put up a barrier, there's no connection. And to me, that's not brave. It's really easy for me just to say, I'm right, you're wrong, and so there's my wall, instead of actually being brave enough to try to understand where people are coming from with things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important to remember. I was talking with Jake Hemming. He's a fellow singer-songwriter up here in the Seattle area, and his episode on Bare Naked Bravery just aired a couple weeks ago. And he started the interview with me by saying, well, I don't think I'm very brave, but I'm honored to be here, and I think that is a identifying factor of someone who is brave when they say they don't feel very brave. Somebody who runs in to save somebody in a burning building, they come out, you see them, getting interviewed on the news, and they're like, well, I hope anybody else would have done the same thing. Like
that's not bravery. That's like just being a human being.
I'm not a hero. I'm just here. And I think if we go about our lives trying to be brave, it's gonna feel scary. It's gonna not feel like bravery. In fact, I think the moments where you don't feel brave proves that you are being brave.
Well, I kind of like to coin what you just said, that bravery feels like fear. Like, bravery doesn't feel like bravery. Bravery feels like fear. And because it's like, cool, when I'm feeling brave, it's because I'm scared crapless right now, and I gotta go out and I'm doing this thing. So I kind of like that idea.
It's true, though.
I've enjoyed our talk today. Where can people find out more about the work that you do? I mean, I know you've even got, music CDs, you got your book that's coming, you've got your coloring book that's out, your podcast. What's the best way for people to connect with you? I'm
also working on a fun, class for creative entrepreneurs to help them put themselves out there. A bunch of fun things. I'm working on that. But to answer your question, you can go to emilyannpeterson.com or barenakedbravery.com. They both go to the same place right now. One is easier to spell than the other for some people, so I like to give both of those. But the podcast is on iTunes and anywhere podcasts are heard, and I'm on Instagram too. I'm loving Instagram these days. Loving it. So.
Awesome. Well, Emily Ann, thank you so much for being on the show today, talking with us about bravery. I'm sure our audience has, at the very least, learned something, but I hope they've learned a lot and enjoyed our conversation together. It's been a pleasure. And thank you all so much for listening today. I hope you all have a very present and brave moment. Namaste. Hey everybody, it's Ashton here with an announcement. We're starting a weekly contest giveaway over at Savannah Spirit. If you'd like to enter into the contest to win one of our weekly prizes, go to savannahspirit.com/contest. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast today, we'd really appreciate it if you went over to iTunes, left us a review, leave us some comments, and share this podcast with anyone who you think might enjoy it. Also want to invite you to go check out Savannah East, which is the name of our blog and also the name of a Facebook group where I interact with guests and our audience. We'll post recent episodes up there as well as interesting articles relating to our guests and or the topics on the shows. And again, thank you so much for listening. Namaste.
You've been listening to the Savannah Podcast. To find out more about Savannah, go to savannahspirit.com or follow Savannah on Facebook at facebook.com/Savannah Spirit. For daily inspiration, check out our blog at savannaheast.com. Be sure to join us next week for a new episode, and thank you for listening to the Savannah Podcast.